Greetings, time travelers and happy readers all. Today we're looking at session 10 of the Reader's Workshop, and we're talking about interesting versus important. Your I can statement is I can distinguish between important information and interesting information. And I want you to watch this quick video before we jump in.
Facts. Interesting versus important. When we're reading nonfiction sources, it's important to remember that we have to distinguish whether facts are interesting to us or important to the article. Fact is something neat to read about, or a fun fact, where an important one is needed for the topic and a major fact. Interesting is something you find cool or interesting and not always important to the article. An important fact is vital to the text, important to the subject, and something that makes the subject what it is. Interesting facts can be neat, but when we're reading nonfiction sources, we want to focus on what is important. Here are some final tips to start finding the information you need. Identify the topic and subject of your article. What is this article about? Find facts that tell you more about the topic. Ask yourself, is this important to the topic? Now let's go find these facts.
All right, let's go find these facts. I want you to think about what you take to school, back when you used to go to school. What things were important? What things did you have to take with you every day? And if you were there now, what would you have to take? So clearly there you have books that you might have to take, your book bag, your cell phone, a bottle of water, maybe your lunch, and these days, certainly some sort of a mask or face covering. These things are important. These are things that you need to have every day when you go to school. So they're necessary to what you're going to do that day. But what else do you take to school? Well, these things are kind of interesting, but they're not really necessary. Might be fun to have a plush unicorn in your bag, but do you really need one? And ladies especially, but we will not be gender specific here. Any of you who care to wear makeup, do you need to bring it to school? Shouldn't you have applied that before you left the house? And who remembers these? Fidget spinners. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Fidget spinners. They're fun to play with, but they're not necessary. And believe it or not, I actually had a student bring a mini waffle iron to school one day. She had it in her book bag. I don't know what she thought she was going to do with it. She didn't bring the ingredients to make waffles. And even if she had, she wouldn't have been allowed to make them at school. So I always wondered, why did she bring a waffle iron? It was interesting, but it certainly wasn't necessary to take to school. So today I'm going to teach you as readers how to distinguish between important details and interesting details. There are always details in stories or articles that you go, oh, that's interesting. But it might not be necessary to the point they're trying to make. It might be an aside. It might be something that, and oh, by the way, did you know? Sometimes we have to think hard to determine whether something is interesting or important. And so when we make our lists of interesting and important today, we're going to put things in columns and then we might go back and switch them around. Just because you put it in one column doesn't mean it has to stay there. So as we read our article today, we're going to think about which things we chose to be interesting and which things we chose to be important and why. So I'm going to read to you from an article today called Defying Gravity. And it is about the astronaut Mae Jemison. I want you to remember as we're doing this that you can only put important details in the important side, but you can put both in the interesting side because you can move them over. So try to be careful But of course, you can move everything around. Just remember that the the important details have to support the topic. They have to have a reason for being there other than just for you to go, oh, gee, I didn't know that. And if you think back to our really strategy, it comes into play here as well because you're going to look at things that are interesting and you're going to go, oh, really? But is it important? It could be interesting and important, right? So it takes a little practice and we'll get it. We'll get the hang of it. So I'm going to start you out on an article today and we'll talk about how we identify interesting versus important. And here we have the article, and I'm going to take some of this off of here. Let's start from scratch. Well, we're going to try to start from scratch. Oh, first world problems, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so have you ever wanted to float above the earth? Or maybe defy gravity? Dr. Mae Jemison did, but she couldn't decide how to best achieve this goal. Perhaps she should study science and become an astronaut. Or maybe she should follow her love of dance and become a professional dancer. At first glance, these two dreams seem like they belong at opposite ends of a wish list, but Mae Jemison followed both her dreams of dancing and becoming an astronaut. She became the first African American woman astronaut and showed the world how dancing and space travel aren't that different. So there's a lot here, and that's why I chunked this out for you. So let's just look at this first part and think about what we might find interesting here. Okay, I find it interesting that she wanted to be an astronaut and a dancer. You don't see that combination very often. Okay, so that's interesting. Is it important? It might be. Um, at first glance, these two dreams seem like they belong on opposite ends of the wish list, but she followed both of her dreams. Okay, so she followed both of her dreams might be important. So, what her dreams were may not be as important as the fact that she did follow them both. In other words, she didn't let anybody stop her. She didn't listen to anyone who said, "Oh, well, you can't be an astronaut. You're a woman. You can't be an astronaut. You're black. You can't be an astronaut. You're you dance. Dancers aren't astronauts. You can't do that." So, for some reason, she decided that she was going to do both. And she became the first African American female astronaut. It was hard enough for women, but African American women really had a struggle. Okay, so I think that's enough to pull from that particular paragraph. Let's look down here. Born October 17th, 1956, in Decatur, Alabama, Mae and her family moved to Chicago when she was only 3. May always considered Chicago her home. As a young girl, May imagined by now we'd be going into space like you were going to work. Her parents were always very supportive of her dreams of studying science, even if her teachers were not always so open minded. When May was 5 years old, her kindergarten teacher asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up, and May replied, a scientist. Okay, so here's something I see all the time when people write book reviews about biographies, about real people. I see this happen a lot. She was born October 17th, 1956. A lot of you will put that over here. You'll put that as a fact, okay? It is a fact. But the fact that she was born on October 17th of 1956, does that have anything to do with her defying gravity? Does it have anything to do with her becoming an astronaut? No. If you wanted to put something interesting over here, you could say that, well, I'll be honest with you, I don't see anything really interesting in this paragraph. I see important, but I don't see interesting. So if there's nothing really interesting, I'm going to move over here to the important side. Her parents were very supportive of her dreams. So parents supported her. Um, Even if her teachers were not always so open minded. So her teachers did not. Oh, that's interesting. But that's also important. So I might have taken this and put it over here. Because did you hear what I said? I said, oh, that's interesting. So even though it's interesting, I think it does have something to do with her pursuing her dream. I don't know why it's not pasting, but let's try it again. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to put it on both sides for right now, and I might go back and change that later. But when she was 5 years old, her kindergarten teacher asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up, and she replied, a scientist. So she wanted to be a scientist at age 5. That might be important. Okay, so let's go down. Her teacher was surprised as there weren't many women scientists in 1961, so her teacher said, you must mean a nurse. Okay, that's interesting to me. Her teacher assumed she wanted to be a nurse. Why do you think that is? Well, back in the 1960s, women weren't doctors really, and they certainly weren't scientists, but they were nurses. A lot like the teaching profession. Mostly women were teachers for the longest time. It's only recently that we've been able to incorporate more male teachers into this sort of sorority of teacherhood. Um, Science was definitely a boys' club. So interesting that her teacher would assume that she wanted to be a nurse. And she remembers thinking that there was nothing wrong with being a nurse, but that was not what she wanted to be. And she said, no, I want to be a scientist. But she also loved to dance. Okay, so she loved to dance. That's interesting. As a young girl, she took every kind of dance that she could: ballet, tap, jazz, and African. Most people might think that dance is the exact opposite of science. After all, it's an art. What could dance training possibly offer to becoming a scientist or an astronaut? As May put it, in dance class, I grew stronger and gained an appreciation for hard work, physical strength, and grace. The lessons she learned from dance would eventually serve her very well in her astronaut training. Okay, well, you know what? I like that whole sentence, and I'm going to steal it. Because here now we're starting to make a connection between dance and scientist or astronaut. The lessons that she learned from the hard work in dance would serve her very well in her astronaut training, because you have to go through hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of training to become an astronaut. And a lot of it is physical, but a lot of it is mental and psychological. And the dance gave her the discipline to be able to do that. So that's a pretty important piece of information. To become an astronaut, she became a dancer, and that helped her with the discipline that she needed to become that. So that's the difference between interesting and important. All important facts, well, no, most important facts are interesting. But they have to relate to the topic. Now we're talking about defying gravity or becoming an astronaut. So what we have here are some things that tie into defying gravity. We have that she followed both of her dreams to become the first African American female astronaut. Oh, I'm sorry. And be a dancer. Let's add that. And that showed that she had drive and determination, and that helped her in her quest. It's interesting that she wanted to be an astronaut and a dancer, because you just don't see that very often. Her parents supported her dreams, but her teachers did not support her dreams. Either one of these could go. Both of these could go. Now that I'm looking at it, this could also have gone under interesting, because is it really, really necessary to the topic? You could argue that it is, because if she didn't have the support of her parents, maybe she wouldn't have the drive to go and pursue these things. But I'm gonna say that it might just be an interesting fact right now. So I might take this off of here. And I'm going to put that back under interesting. Wanted to be a scientist, pardon my typing, at age 5. That's important, because how many of us knew at age 5 what we wanted to be if we grow up? I certainly didn't. I was probably 6 by the time I figured it out. But when I was 6, I wanted to be an attorney, and here I am, a teacher, so you never know. Okay, so let's go down. Then we said that her teacher assumed that she wanted to be a nurse, because that's what women did. Women were teachers or nurses or librarians or store clerks or waitresses. There were very specific roles for women in the 1960s. But the lessons that she learned from dance would eventually serve her very well in her astronaut training. That's an important fact, because now we're talking about what she did to get to her goal. What did she do to achieve that goal? Well, the dance classes. The dance classes helped her achieve that goal. Okay? That's how you look at interesting versus important. And did you see how sometimes I put things in one column and then I switched them over to another? You're certainly more than welcome to do that. I absolutely recommend it. Okay, so now I want you to finish this article and do the same thing that I did. I want you to complete this piece, and then you're going to turn this in Canvas. I will upload the document as it is right now with my notes on it, so you can look and see. Okay? But I expect you to fill out the rest of it and turn it in. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to talk to you about today, about interesting and important. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. and you have a lovely day.